Yes, can you hear that? Okay. I'm Kelly Butler, I'm Director of External Affairs at BEMA, so we're a trade body, we look after the electrotechnical manufacturing sector. I've been involved in building services and energy for 28 years now, so yeah. There you go.
Olivia.
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia, I'm Head of Policy and Communications at the Heat Pump Association. We're also a trade body and we represent around 400 organisations working at all levels of the heat pump supply chain.
Phil Draper, 21 Engineering, Engineer of the Year 2024 for SSES, M&E Design Consultant.
We should have another microphone.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Peter McBride. I'm Mixergy Sales Director. Mixergy is a smart hot water cylinder. I've been in the industry for 26 years, previously a plumber, gas engineer, and then more into the world of sales and specification.
Wonderful, thank you very much. So I want to jump in just by talking about, why does hot water matter in this journey? And Peter, let's start with you as you've got the microphone. Talk to us from your point of view. Why does hot water matter? Why are we having this discussion now?
So hot water is very important. Within the UK, we have transitioned a lot from stored hot water to combination boilers, which are instantaneous. So these are 24, 30, 40 kilowatt combination boilers. As we now transition to net zero, we need to now revert back to stored hot water. So you might have solutions like a heat pump, which will have stored hot water, or you might have homes which have, for instance, storage heaters or direct electric heaters, infrared, etc. But you still need to go back down to the stored hot water. And every home is going to have to get to the stage of having stored hot water to help balance the grid and all that other, clever stuff that goes with it.
Brilliant. So I really want to treat this as a bit of a conversation. So any of you who want to kind of speak at any point, feel free to jump in. So you obviously have various different perspectives from across the industry. So does anyone else want to answer that question about why, from your perspective, are we having this conversation and why is it important that we're talking about hot water in the wider picture?
Hot water effectively, and I'm going to talk here from the commercial application, effectively is a necessary evil we have to have in a building. The historical designs has been a central LTHW large boiler that's then operating to make the domestic water at the right temperature. We're able to run everything inefficient, going that way. We start separating out hot water from a larger building. It allows us to operate in an effective way completely. We start storing water in an effective way. It allows us to actually recover energy from different ways. With a VRF system in today's world, we could actually be cooling a building but getting free hot water at the same time. So we've got to start talking about how we operate and how we think of hot water as an energy source, not just actually how we flush our hands.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And so the conversation is obviously around flexibility, interoperability, and all of that fun stuff that we've been talking about a lot on this stage today. How do we integrate intelligent hot water storage into both domestic and commercial applications to kind of further what we need to do in terms to reach our goals? Go for it. Whoever wants to answer. Jump in. Yeah, go Kelly.
Before I get on to that, I just wanted to make an additional point on the importance of hot water. So for many years, hot water has actually been the dominant service in quite a lot of buildings, whether it's powered by a boiler or electrically. It's very much hot water driven. Why is that? We have more efficient buildings, the heat loads are smaller, but hot water use doesn't change. We all need a bath, we all need a shower. I think what's interesting on hot water is that the market has changed obviously quite a lot. So I made a point of some numbers actually. So at the minute, we've got around 9 million hot water cylinders in England, which is about 40 to 50%, say 45% of homes. That's down from 77% back in sort of 24 years ago. Why is that important? Because cylinders store hot water, which is a storage medium, which is an energy source, which is back to the point that was made. So in a typical cylinder, 150 litres, you get about 7 kilowatt hours of energy stored. A lot of electric cars, we've got them, around about the same, 7 kilowatt. Now, if you can use available low-cost renewable energy in a cylinder, if you don't have an electric vehicle or a battery energy storage system, you are now optimizing. You have a different proposition. People have been sold hot water solutions based on space saving. Now, hot water is about how do I reduce my energy bills, and that's why it's fascinating, is because hot water in homes now becomes part of the energy system, and I think we're going to talk about that later. And how do you integrate it? You have to have connectivity between what's in the home through the supply contracts with your energy supplier, then to the grid, because that's where the power is coming from.
Go ahead.
I was just going to come in, I think, from a wider position and sort of setting the scene. I think we saw, particularly when the new government came in, a real big focus on clean power by 2030, and that still stands as the government's target. And I think what we've also seen from people like NESO, so the National Energy System Operator, that we need to unlock sort of 55 gigawatts of consumer-led flex by 2030. And if there's many intelligent hot water systems and storage systems in homes, that's going to help to unlock that flex, which then allows us to use sort of the intermittently generated renewable electricity or energy. We can use that within homes, we can store it, we can preheat, and it also allows the consumer to see a cost benefit without having to sacrifice sort of any level of comfort. So you can have a hot shower, as Kelly said, when you want one.
Brilliant. Well, we'll stick with you, Olivia, and talk about how policy is shaping the growth of these intelligent hot water systems, and what does that look like and how important is that?
Yeah, so I think obviously from the heat pump side, we've seen a real sort of growth in heat pump sales in the UK in the last year. So we saw under 100,000 into UK homes, sold into UK homes last year, and we're looking at sort of a predicted 28% growth for this year as well. And with most of those comes a form of hot water. We're also seeing things like the Future Home Standard, which we are desperately waiting for it to be published, which we know will start to mean that heat pumps become sort of the go-to in homes. So in the policy world, it's quite busy in this area, but there's a lot of, this year's sort of been more around strategy and sort of statements, and actually next year we need to move to sort of implementation and these actually going into people's homes. But I think we're expecting next year a very big drive in demand for heat pumps and hot water solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that has come up several times today on this stage, and I'm sure other stages as well, is the importance of collaboration between all different organisations across this. So I don't know who wants to kind of speak on this in terms of, how can policymakers, developers, housing providers, trade associations, etc., work together on this?
I'll say one thing on that. Just we've worked very closely with Mixergy and with the HPA over the last year. 65 gigawatts. So that's the number that you said, and it's right. But the hot water saving potential is 70 gigawatts. So you could do it all with hot water, actually. So just to make that point, interestingly, the government was kind of forgetting hot water, which is really weird because there's, as I said, nearly half of the homes actually have a cylinder or the capability to deliver that kind of saving. So working with Mixergy, working with the likes of the HPA and other bodies, we've now convinced government to include hot water in its framework for flexibility, which it wasn't initially. It was completely ignored. All the focus was on other technologies. So collaboration is hard, and it's hard to communicate and get the message across to policy, but it's definitely tipping, and we're seeing a lot of change. And I think Mixergy have done a lot of good work on that with Tom.
So why do you think that it was mostly ignored early on before kind of that push for the government to include it in these plans?
They don't understand it.
So what's the barrier there? How can we help people understand it, and why isn't it being understood by the people that really need to understand it?
I think for me it's education. Kelly's made a good point. There's already a lot of cylinders out in the market. they're not smart unless they're a Mixergy. So yes, they're able to help with the flexibility with regards to sort of load shifting. However, when it comes to scenarios like demand side response or excess solar, so at the moment within the future home standards, solar is going to become mandatory. However, a solar PV diverter is not, and neither is a home battery. So we are running the risk of a lot more homes being installed with solar, which is great. However, we then run the risk that a lot of this solar that's been generated is not going to be stored locally and is only going to go back to the grid, which then makes the grid scenario even more complicated than it currently is. And this is where smart hot water, like Mixergy, is able to step in, heat what they require, absorb any excess solar when there is an occasion of DSR and other occasions like that on the grid. We're able to intelligently understand when to turn on, when to turn off, which a traditional cylinder quite simply cannot do.
Yeah, I think also on this point, and I'm probably guilty of doing it, as I'm sure most of us are. We talk a lot about the technology and the features that it has, and it can do this, it can preheat, it only heats this part. But actually, we probably need to get maybe a bit better in framing the actual outcomes for the consumer or for the end user and the business. So it will lower your bills. It allows grid stability, which is less money reinforced to the grid, and then less money off your energy bill. So there's probably an element of I think, especially with policy, it's a two-way thing. There's the industry speaking in a good language for civil servants, but also them doing the same. So, there's a bit of a takeaway for us to work on as well.
So we started seeing more around the night tariffs. If we go back, actually, you would remember, it's obviously clearly too young, but obviously when we had, the Eco 7s and Economy 7s, that sort of stuff, where obviously we done it to save money. That was the whole point of the driver. They're obviously now coming back with the EVs, those bits and pieces. We're now starting to see the Octopus offering a higher tariff, actually, or the benefits by turning off at 4 o'clock at night on the colder periods. Will you start making the tariff far more agile in that way? It will start encouraging people to start using it a different way. It will start allowing us to actually understand how much hot water do we use. That whole point I said earlier, that necessary evil, we still think we always have to have it. You always have to have the hot water at your tap when you need it, and that's a culture change as well to go for that way.
Yeah, and I feel like there is a big mindset shift for consumers, as well as obviously government and commercial entities as well. But are there lessons that we can learn from, say, the residential installations of heat pumps, etc.? Kelly, do you have a go for it?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this quite a lot with policymakers. The beauty of this is it is a different thing for consumers to understand. In 30 years nearly that I've been involved in this, customers do not care about gaming energy and playing around. They don't. They care about the energy bill. Now, the beauty with smart hot water, and in fact a lot of the smart technologies, is that actually you can be quite passive about it. So I'm going to be having a shower here, or I'm going to be having a bath there. I know what my hot water profile is. You take products like Mixergy, I mean, a lot of it is adaptive control. It learns your profile, it understands. But from a customer point of view, it's lower energy bills. But if you go bigger than that, anyone who reads the papers would have seen in the last few months a lot on energy pricing and a lot on the indirect costs of our new energy system, so curtailment. So we pay renewable energy generators to switch off. That's mad. Why would you do that when you could use 9 million cylinders to store that hot water smartly at a lower price for the customer, and it's less cost for the taxpayer? It doesn't really make sense not to do that.
So is there a solution? I know that's a big question this early on in the session, but is there a solution to this in terms of utilizing what's already there and making this more intelligent and flexible?
Well, the solution is simply Mixergy. So, we are the only smart hot water cylinder. There is new policy coming up soon, which is SSES, which is a smart, secure electrical system, which basically means every other stored hot water cylinder in the future has to be able to deliver what Mixergy can deliver today. So that gives manufacturers a very narrow bandwidth of time to invest in making sure they're compliant and can do what we can do without impeaching on our patents.
Yeah, brilliant. So, with the smart, secure energy systems coming in, and like, how can we ensure that people actually understand this and it's actually adopted? Obviously, that there are regulations and whatnot, but it seems like there is a huge missing piece here that is just education, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on this. So I suppose the SSES program that government are running, I don't think it's not something that we want a consumer to understand, to be honest. But from our perspective, and we, as Kelly said, we've all been working quite a lot with government. There's quite a lot of regular meetings on this framework. From our perspective, the thing with SSES is manufacturers want to know the timelines, they want to know the cost, and they want to know that what their sort of their R&D programs, they can plan accordingly to the framework. So I think from a government perspective, they've sent out so many emails, so many workshops trying to help the manufacturers and assist the manufacturers in understanding what they need to do to make their product comply with both phase 1 and phase 2. But for us, it's sort of, we're working to sort of demystify that, what the government put down on paper, and help our manufacturers meet those goals.
Shall I just add something else? I mean, we're talking about hot water here, but there are other technologies that offer flexibility. So a battery energy storage system can do the same thing. Won't give you hot water, obviously. Electric vehicle, if it's storage heaters, whatever. We've got to get away from there's two things here. We'll get away from the idea of off-peak tariffs. They're not off-peak tariffs in the old sense. Off-peak was based on demand, not supply. And this is all based around supply and the profile for that. The customer really, you can take out the equation, because if they have a central home energy management system, let's say that they've got hot water, they have an electric vehicle, maybe a heat pump, electric vehicle, battery energy storage. All they need to know is that through adaptive learning, the management system knows that they need to charge their car at night. So what we'll do is we won't store the energy in the hot water, we'll prioritise the car, but we might be able to do the hot water at, say, 5 in the evening. We're talking about super insulated cylinders here, like thermal stratification technology. These are different to the things that I grew up with as a kid. So, the customer just needs to know they get the service. They want a service at best price with no challenge to their lifestyle. That's all they need to know.
Yeah, I must admit, I totally agree with that, Kelly. You mentioned earlier about some people, well, most people generally just care about their energy bill and don't like to, should we say, have to interact or play around with things. So at Mixergy, it's quite interesting. We have some sort of early adopters who would be classed as perhaps geeks, and I probably put myself in that similar category where I have a spreadsheet and every month I fill in the details around my home and so on. And then we come across other people who have said, it's true, it's yearly service, never touched it. Never touched the app, never looked at it, because the tank learns its usage, understands whether they have solar or not, etc. It just does what they need to do. And another interesting thing, most people only really care about the energy bill. So I recently went on a decarbonisation journey on my home, and I'll talk about it very briefly, about what I've done, and you can kind of see people switching off and looking at their phone. And then when I say to them my total yearly energy bill was minus £400, you then see them look up and go, oh, wow. Because in reality, a lot of people, generally speaking, don't understand decarbonisation, don't really care about decarbonisation. Am I warm? Do I have hot water? And what does it cost me?
Yeah, all great points. And I love a spreadsheet. And I feel like the majority of people, though, like you say, they don't care. It's all about prices. But that's on the consumer side. Are the barriers in non-domestic settings similar?
Non-domestic is generally governed by the end user far more, probably more straighter, to go for that way. You've got lease hours. We don't have so much flexibility. We can't go and say, can you turn your lights on at 9 o'clock at night, when actually someone's sat there. There's no reason why we can't move the energy around in the same way. We can recover the heating for the hot water in the afternoon when we've got the cooling on. There's an awful lot more we can do actually then to move the energy around in the same way to hold it off. We had the old triad tariffs going for that way, where actually we're charging people £50 a kilowatt going for that way. you putting or turning off your hot water at that time period, you could save a building £5,000-6,000 in an hour's worth of usage. Up till today, or up till recently, it wasn't possible going for that way. And obviously now, Mixergy have now got their smart commercial cylinder. It allows that technology to be moved into a commercial application far more easier and off the shelf.
Yeah, brilliant. So I don't know if anyone else wants to kind of jump in on that non-domestic kind of point and what we need to do to scale these commercial applications. And again, going back to the collaboration point, what's required there?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously commercial covers like a lot of and I'm not a commercial expert, so I'm actually interested to know this. So, some commercial buildings, they're commercial because they're occupied by people who might live more like a residential lifestyle. It might be a hospital or a hotel or whatever. But of course, a lot of commercial is point of use. So for point of use, does the same rule apply? Would you use a Mixergy cylinder, through a storage vessel, and how would you do that?
So you probably say it's 60-40, so 60% generally centralised domestic water worth that of a situation. But there's no reason why you still can't control your point of use with an app. There's no reason why you can't put that onto a smart controller and actually hold it back at the same time periods. It's not all the technology's out there to do it with it. We actually done a point of use control situation on the Cheesegrater, going that way, and we could have saved, with controlling the point of use heaters, £25,000 a year in just controlling it from not being on the whole time periods, but still having hot water available when we needed it.
We have worked with a large national football stadium, which has circa 50 events a year. So let's make it easy, one a week. They have an awful lot of hot water cylinders, and the challenge with traditional hot water cylinders is they have to heat the whole tank's contents, keep it at a certain temperature to comply with L8 legislation. We installed a couple of Mixergy cylinders, and we had certain trials through certain events to understand the usage profiles, and we was able to save them 25% on their energy usage and energy bill. We then explained to them around if they was to change their whole fleet, we was able to save them circa 300, from memory I think it's about £330,000 a year on their hot water energy bill. So non-events only heat a very certain amount and hold it at a certain temperature. Come the event, you can then heat it up a little bit further to obviously accommodate what's required. But then the real big thing with this was some quick calculations. They would have had circa 5 megawatts worth of energy storage to help with the grid. So again, when I explained to them around DSR occasions and grid flexibility, it became quite a compelling story, really.
And like consumers, are organisations like that, are they also mostly focused on cost, or is it a bit more complex than that when they're kind of considering what their needs are and what their motivations are for going for something like this?
Unfortunately, with non-domestic, it's compliance first. That's the only thing. With L8, they don't want to have any risk. Yeah. And that's the hardest thing to actually trying to get them to understand, is how we can govern risk in the right way. Yes, it's that. So they need to have their cylinder at 60, and they need to have the return temperature at 50. It needs to be available 24 hours a day. So that's always the hardest bit, to try and get them to actually understand. With a smart cylinder, we can operate it in this way, and we only got to have 10% hot that way. We only got to heat up what you need. Or actually, if we want to, in the triad or actually the right grid experience, we can heat up the whole cylinder and off we go. So that's that. It's trying to get the end users to understand the reduced risk with a smart cylinder, to how that can help them first. The cost is just a byproduct.
Yeah. Brilliant, great. So I'm going to turn to this lovely audience now. Does anyone have any questions for our panel? Wonderful.
Hi, it's Matt from the editor at Refurb and Retrofit magazine. The best bankers are made from the highest scoring graduates at organisations like LSE and other colleges. Some of the most expert in this industry are poached by commercial companies like you. So how do you overcome the problem that government, which sets policy, is often filled with people that are less informed with the staff that you have?
Is that aimed at me, or where's... So I'm quite shy retiring in myself. I don't like to say much. So stop laughing in the back. Now, I do a lot with SIMSI. So actually, I'm the HVAC chair, bits and pieces. So there's always avenues that people that want to help can feedback up the market to actually make people learn how it's got to be done. Case studies, collaborations, talking here today. So that's what the first we've got to try and do is if you've got an opinion and you believe it's right, come and say it at events like this. Try and get two people to understand, pass the message on and go from there. And from my point of view is work with SIMSIs and those sort of organisations to actually make them understand and they can obviously talk to the right people in the government so to go the right way. So it's around probably, my point of view is passion to actually make it work.
Anyone else want to?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think a trade body is a great way to. I will say that because I'm from one, but it's a great way to get 50 people in a room that wouldn't normally be in a room with, say, a deputy director at a government department. Get them in a room, get a confirmed position, and take that to the government. I take the point that civil servants are civil servants, but I think we have regular conversations with them every single day, and there's some very smart civil servants, but it's just very tricky because it's politics at the end of the day. I think I work on SSES, we've worked together and that engaged lots and lots of members that perhaps wouldn't normally be able to directly engage with civil servants and with the government, and taken their sort of more often technical perspectives and been able to put them into government understandable language. So there are channels to do it. It's nothing's ever easy, but there's work being done.
Mixergy has a colleague, a guy called Tom Oldfield, who I'm sure most people in the room knows. He's our head of external affairs. Tom is very, very good at his job. One key thing we have is data as well. So if we make certain claims, it's backed up by actual data, which obviously makes that story quite compelling. So Tom works very closely with Kelly and various others to demonstrate the benefits of Mixergy, why Mixergy is relevant, and here's the actual data to back up why we're saying whatever we may be saying.
I think it's horses for courses. I mean, in government, what you've got to remember is that not only do civil servants change, there's no point in finding yourself an expert because they won't be there for very long. So the experts come from industry or from the SIBSs of this world and that kind of thing. They're the experts in policy. I mean, you can't even get a minister to sit in a chair for longer than 6 months anymore before someone else comes in. Got to read all the papers again, got to learn this all again. That's why trade associations and professional bodies exist, exactly for that reason.
Brilliant. Any other questions? Wonderful. Love seeing loads of hands up.
Hi, my name's Eamon Conway. I've previously been involved in this industry with a business called Curtailment. We did immersion, remote control immersions. Just wondering the panel, are they familiar with the entity Energy Cloud in England, which is set up to take surplus curtailed energy and deploy it through technology into fuel-poor homes? Just wondering if you have any experience of that organisation and what you think of it.
Heard of it, not experienced it.
No, not personally. Mixergy does a very similar thing. We're able to communicate with the grid to understand what's happening with regards to, Kelly mentioned previously. So last financial year we spent in excess of £2 billion on curtailment. So what Mixergy is able to do is understand the state of charge of every single cylinder that we have. So we're able to understand that each cylinder can hold X amount of kilowatt hours, whatever that may be. We're able to understand what's happening at grid level with regards to demand. We're also able to understand any pricing points as well. So we're able to then intelligently able to flex the grid to understand when we can essentially pulse all of the Mixergy cylinders like a massive virtual battery to help, like Kelly said previously, use this energy instead of just basically wasting it at considerable cost.
Yeah, the difference just with the reason I mentioned Energy Cloud, it's a non-for-profit, but the idea is that the energy that's wasted gets deployed into fuel-poor homes. So it's a slightly different model, but it would need all the smarts that you have there, Peter, and other technologies. But it's quite a new entity, but I'm just wondering if you'd had any traction yet. But
so just a quick one, Eamon. Just want a quick question. Lovely to see you again. Haven't seen you for a couple of years. So I'm familiar with it, but the premise of it is that it becomes like an energy broker in itself then, or an energy supply provider in its own right. Because it has to be, it's acquiring energy as a resource, and then it's disseminating that to buildings. So in a way, what is it, an aggregator, a supplier?
No, it's a non-for-profit. So the idea is that rather than turning the wind farm off and dump the wind or curtail the wind, that gets deployed into the 8 or 9 million tanks that are in, well, not all in fuel-poor homes, but the number that's in fuel-poor homes. The politics and the methodology to get it from the wind farm into the tank is the challenge. But the entity, it started off in Ireland, but it's set up now in England and Scotland as well, as far as I know. So it was more a question if you were familiar with it, that was all.
Yeah. Well, I will be in a minute, because I'll have a chat with you afterwards. Right?
Brilliant. Any more questions? No? Okay, so I'm going to ask one more as I come back to the panel. So this might be an annoying question. I'm going to ask you all to predict the future. What's next in your respective areas with regards to these intelligent systems? Is there anything you're personally working on, or anything you're excited about that might kind of give us a sense of where things are going next?
Yes, I'm trying to figure out what I can say without giving too much away, really. So Mixergy are constantly evolving. We're constantly looking at other different configurations of different systems, how we can improve our current range, how we can add other ranges which are able to control perhaps more than just hot water, shall we say, without trying to give too much away. Next year, we're looking to have another version where we're able to help balance the grid and, should we say, pay directly to the potential end user. I'm skating very close to the NDA process here, so I'm trying to just stay the right.
Appreciate it.
We've got a couple of Mixergy people here. I'll get in trouble if I say too much.
From my point of view, I'm focused on the collaboration. I think at the moment the industry doesn't do enough of actually understanding the end user, domestic, non-domestic, the products available, how we can integrate multiple products actually all into one go beyond the smart grid in that way as it sits in that way. So I focus around heat recovery, energy recovery in that way to actually try and reduce the grid consumption actually in a normal sense of the way for energy management, but there's not enough of it.
Yeah, I think for me, we're still in a very early adopter phase in terms of all this sort of technology. So for me, next year, I'm hoping we'll see a lot more, implementation. We'll see the ambition turn into reality. We'll see these technologies in people's homes and in people's, businesses. And the more it's like when someone gets solar panels on your roof, they just sort of mutate and you see them down the street. So yeah, I'm hoping the next year we'll see that continued growth and we'll start to transition into a bit more of a mass market.
Brilliant. Kelly, anything to add?
Yeah, so although, to contradict myself, taking the customer out of the equation, that's only in terms of the complexity of flexibility. You have to normalise electrification. So in this country, electric is seen as an expensive resource or expensive fuel. It's probably unfairly, given current technology, is associated with cold nights in the early 70s, and this is why I say the economy thing needs to be just ditched. If it was a brand, you'd get rid of it and call it something else. But you have to normalise it, make people understand that electric is actually, a good thing from a price point of view, from a comfort point of view, from a service point of view, from a lifestyle point of view.
Brilliant. So this has been genuinely a fascinating discussion. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to our audience and everyone who asked questions. I'm sure the panelists will hang around for a couple of minutes after this if you want to have any further discussion. So please join me in giving them a big round of applause. Thank you so much.